I'm originally born and raised in Riverside. From 3 to 4 or 5 years of age, I knew that I was in a really jacked up situation with my family. And my mom, she was a pathological liar. She was also bipolar, drug user, drug abuser. Father was an alcoholic and drug user. Very, very distraught type family environment. My mom, everything from torture to beating us to freaking black and blue, torturing us to where she would, to discipline us, she would put a single layer of rice on a single sheet of a newspaper and make us kneel in it. And if our butts touched our heels, she'd get the chancla or the belt, whatever she had in her hand, she'll whip us and tell us to prop up. That was my childhood, right? So my mom faked my own death with my family members to collect money for the funeral. My mom convinced me if I slept in the closet, she would buy me a boogie board and a rash guard. 3 months passed, give or take. My father found out, beat the living shit out of my mom. My mom threw a butcher knife at him, got stuck in the back of his calf. He got arrested, she went up. So this is where it all started, where we ended up going into like somewhat foster care and then into programs and things of that nature. So that was my whole childhood. When I was 11, my father then disappeared. And then a whole year passes because he had a whole nother life here in Riverside with somebody else. My mom found out where he was working. So she said, hey, Mijo, grab your bags, get up, let's go. Pull up. And I was like, fuck, there's my dad. We went inside. My mom calls us over and say, hey, you're gonna stay with your dad for a couple weeks? We stayed there with our dad. Our dad then takes us to his apartment. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. Him, his new girlfriend, it wasn't wife at the time, his new baby daughter, girlfriend's 2 daughters, plus me and my brother. Whoa. So 7 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. And that's when I went from this young innocent kid that loved football, baseball, wore a Chargers hat, still was into Marvel comics, just a kid. I was 12 and under. 6 months later, this hardened individual got jumped into a gang, started doing drugs. My first hardcore drug was meth at the age of 12. Fast forward till 16, I got expelled from Shamawa Middle School for fighting. If I was tested or I was challenged, I'd just beat you up. If you bullied me, I'd beat you up. That was just me having all that anger inside as a young. By the time I was 16, my dad got heavier into drugs and alcohol. He then committed a crime, landed him in prison, gave him 22 years. At this point, luckily, I found wrestling, and that changed my whole dynamic. Prior to that, I was a gang member, so I was a gangster, wannabe gangster, whatever you want to call it, slinging dope, moving coke, moving weed, whatever I can get my hands on just to survive and make ends meet, I was doing. I found a new passion and just crushed it in wrestling. Luckily, that saved my life because when I was 16, 17, my junior year in high school, my dad got incarcerated. So my stepmom kicked us out. I could no longer live there. I show up to her home, say, hey, we can't support you. We asked her, I was like, hey, what do you want us to do? What are we supposed to fucking do? I told her, and she said, hey, figure it out. And those words are so vivid to this day, dude. And I figured it out. I would throw parties in people's backyards, and that's how I bought my first car. I lived out of my car for about 8-9 months, and then my assistant wrestling coach found out that I was homeless. He asked his parents if I could stay. I was already homeless, so they didn't have to report it to the school. Plus, technically, I was 18, so I was good. And it was my last year. So I was able to bypass a year and a half without telling anybody. It's like no one knew.
Oh.
The only way they found out is I went from a 170-pound kid to 135 pounds in a matter of 8 months. Ended up going into construction, commercial plumbing. I was 23 years old, 24, 23. I hated my fucking job. And then in business, it was a real estate agent or real estate broker who introduced me to real estate. I was 23 years old, 24, 23. I hated my fucking job. He knew I hated my job. He would have us over for dinner, or we'd be around the house, or just family events. And, how's your week going? And then one time I remember he slammed his hand on the table and he said, well, what the fuck are you gonna do? And as he's explaining to me what it takes to be a real estate agent, I'm over here picturing his life, like 2 brand new black Mercedes outside, house on the golf course, everything I've ever wanted as a young man or as a young kid. I was like, I want his fucking life. Getting my roaster license when I was 24, 25. I quit my job. I sold all my tools. As soon as I quit, I started hyperventilating. It was like, fuck, I just fucked up. Because real estate's all commission.
Right.
So going from employee to independent contractor, I was like, holy shit, what am I gonna do? Right? So in my head, I was already looking at like, well shit, I got all my tools. I can go do side jobs if needed, right? But then thank God I was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich. Primarily Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Great book.
If I gave myself an exit, I'm not going to give what I want 100%, right? So that weekend, I sold all my tools, all my specialty tools, my plumb bobs, everything. And so I burned the bridge. I had nothing to go back. And then my first year in real estate did $132,000 in commission. My first two deals, I got them out of LA Fitness. People would ask me about my health and fitness. How are you so strong? How are you so lean? They would ask me anything like that. I was like, look, I work for myself. You know, my career allows me to manage my food intake and manage me to prep my food and everything else. Well, what do? I sell real estate. Just plant a seed. Leave it alone. Do one say, oh, you want to buy a house? No, just leave it alone. Let it nurture and then build the relationship. And then the questions were no longer about how much can you bench? Now it's like, how can you bench and how's the real estate market doing? And so I ended up getting my first two deals. And then that money was equivalent to 1 year as a plumber. So I quit.